Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. We have my good friend Kirsten Adler here on the show with us today. I connected with Kirsten like years ago, and when she was still living in Manhattan, or in the city at least. She is an interdisciplinary movement instructor and the founder of Explore Movement, which is an integrated yoga, Pilates, and Gyrotonic studio. She's in Portland now, but she was, like I said, in the city before. And we've kind of collaborated with patients, and she's been so great with working with a lot of my postpartum patients as well. And I think that she would be a great treat to have you, Kirsten, today to just chat about your experiences and the work that you do. So welcome on to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So why don't we get started first with your background and movement and, kind of what brought you into helping patients or rather clients move better and move more freely. I know you're very passionate about it, and the work that you do. So I'd love for listeners to gain a little understanding of that background.
Sure. So it's been a long journey. I've basically been studying movement my whole life. So I started out dancing as a young child, and I was in a ballet school, and I quickly sort of learned that I didn't have the ballet body, or at least that's what I was told. So from a very young age, I remember watching my peers and sort of wondering with a sense of curiosity, why is it that some people were sort of naturally more flexible? Why was it that some people could jump better, some people could turn better, and so on and so forth? So despite not having the right body, I loved to dance, and I continued. And when I was a tween, I would say about 12 years old, I developed some knee pain. So I ended up at a physical therapy office. And I actually loved going to the physical therapist. I found it really interesting, the manual work they would do and the exercises they gave me. And it helped a lot. My range of motion got better. My knee pain went away. And so it sort of set me off on this wanting to know more about biomechanics and anatomy. And I continued dancing, and I went to Interlochen Arts Academy and then the Boston Conservatory, which were both very rigorous training programs. And so there was, as a young person, there's a lot of burnout that happened. And I found myself going to a yoga class outside of the dance training. And I really fell in love with it because it was the first place where I was invited to listen to my body, to observe my body, but without judgment. And that was so new to me because as a dancer, you were constantly judging your body. That was part of it, a part of growing, part of learning, improving. So to step into that space, that sort of safe environment of just witnessing, felt so good and much needed to counter everything else I was doing. So I knew after graduating from the conservatory that I wanted to share that with others. So I became certified. My very first certification was in yoga, and I started teaching. Like most dancers, I needed something to support dance. And from there, I layered on certifications in Pilates, which I had also done through my dance training, and then Gyrotonic. And somewhere in my 20s, I sort of developed this non-specific back pain or around my sacroiliac joint, like a lot of dancers and yogis get at one time or the other. And I had my own movement practice. I had helped others with their own sort of aches and pains. And I would attend, I was a group class fiend and wanted to take as many group classes as I could, but I couldn't figure out the pain. And it was just sort of this nagging, constant in the background pain that sort of made me feel limited. It made me feel like I didn't quite trust my body anymore. I became a little bit scared to move, I think like so many people who experience pain. So a colleague, fortunately, encouraged me to see her private instructor who is a Pilates and Gyrotonic teacher and also an Alexander technique teacher. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just a new movement teacher. I don't have the money to spend on these lessons. Like, no way. But then, the weeks went by, the pain didn't get better. And so I finally said, okay, I'm going to go take a lesson with her. And in that first lesson, we did very simple foundational exercises that I had done maybe a million times, right? But the way she directed my attention, the way she had me make just a slight change in position, all of a sudden the exercises felt completely different. Some became more easeful, other exercises, all of a sudden I felt very weak. They became more challenging. And at the end of the lesson, I stood up and my back pain, of course, one lesson isn't going to solve anything, but it didn't go away, but it felt so much better. And most of all, I felt like I had a renewed sense of hope. So it was from that place that really has all those experiences, I think, together have made me the movement teacher that I am today, and have really helped me become so passionate about helping people in sort of a similar position, those people who have maybe lost trust in their body or confidence, or feel like they just can't move the way that they used to move. I just love seeing the changes in their mind, their body, their spirits. And that's why I love doing what I do.
Amazing. I love that. That's so soulful. It warms my heart. A lot of the things that you just said resonated a lot with me because, as you know, I'm also a dancer, also yoga instructor, physical therapist now. And it's funny because there's a lot of people that I work with. They're like elite athletes and they're like marathon, triathlon, this and that. And they'll be like, I'm so strong though. I have so much, I like work on my body. I'm like moving. I'm not like that IT person who's sitting in front of the desk and is like, my shoulder hurts, isn't doing anything about it. I'm doing so much about it. Why am I still in pain? And I say, it's the way you're probably doing the things that you're doing. And it's exactly that. I'll have somebody who'll say, I can do a plank for like 3 minutes though. I can hold a plank for like 2 minutes, 5 minutes. You tell me how long I have the strength to do these things. And I'm like, well, and it's just a small cue and a subtle adjustment and a little something that you just like, it seems so small, but it's like, oh my God, tap out in 10 seconds kind of a thing. And it's so true because the quality of those moments, it doesn't have to be this crazy HIIT exercise or something insane in order to get benefit from the movement and to feel the freeness and the liberation of being able to move and with less pain and more mobility and more stability. So I resonate with everything you just said. And I'm so happy that you have those same kinds of experiences. And like you, of course, I have SI joint dysfunction. I have a stress fracture in my back. Lots of things happened in my youth when I was going a little too crazy, doing a couple of too many arabesques and a few too many wheel poses in yoga and, all that good stuff, but we learn and we grow. And,
Yes.
I've said this before on a show before as well, but all those experiences that you went through, it sets you up to be a better instructor. And all those experiences that I went through, I have the most empathy for back pain and how debilitating, crippling, and demoralizing that can be. And that somebody's emotional reaction to that is so true and so valid. And but the good news, like Kirsten just mentioned, is you have the capacity to work through those things. And you just need guidance on how to do that most likely. So I love that and love that your presence and your background has brought you to where you are today with Explore Movement. So tell us a little bit about your practice itself. How do you work with patients?
So right now I mostly work on a one-on-one basis. I'll occasionally do some group class sort of series, but mostly one-on-one. And because, like we were saying, I really love that personalized approach. There's so much now of these sort of one size fits all programs coming out, more of the online platform is developing, and even the virtual reality world. And I think there's a benefit to all of those large fitness programs. I mean, people can really do well with those, but like you're saying, sometimes other people, a lot of people who come to see me, they feel intimidated by those fitness centers or by those programs. They don't feel like they have enough confidence in their body that they'll do the exercises correctly, or they feel like the exercises don't fit their body.
Mm-hmm.
So those are usually the people that I'm seeing, and they come to see me on a weekly basis, some for a few months and some continue for years because they fall in love with the practice and the sort of the never ending process, right? That we can just keep on growing and building, and the learning never stops.
I love that. So let's dive into gyrotonics a little bit, because I think that's something that's really interesting that maybe not everybody knows as much as they might hear yoga and Pilates. I think that's a little bit more out there in mainstream media and Instagram and all that stuff. But I'd love for you as an instructor to kind of just describe a little bit about the background and what exactly entails.
Sure. So Gyrotonic was developed by a man named Julio Horvath in the 70s. And he was a dancer and a swimmer and a gymnast. So a lot of the movements are inspired by those modalities. There are several pieces of equipment that are involved with Gyrotonic, just like Pilates. But I'm certified in the main piece of equipment, which is the Gyrotonic tower. And it's a huge, beautiful piece of equipment that has a bench and then this long, tall tower that you can attach weights to, and it has cables. And so you can do all of these very three-dimensional multiplanar movements with weights attached that can give you a sense of resistance, also a sense of assistance and feedback. And, for me, I always think of Pilates as a little bit more linear. I always joke with people, it's like Joseph Pilates was German. It's very linear work. And Gyrotonic was developed in the 70s, so it's a very free, and you can move in many ways, and it's great for mobility. And clients have described it as sort of a moving massage, which I like that image. It does feel a bit like that.
I love that. I have had the pleasure of going into one Gyrotonic studio to talk to an instructor one time who my patient was going to work with to collaborate. And I remember looking at the class and the one-on-one that was happening. And I was like, this is so interesting. I love it. It's cool because, like you said, there's different planes of movement, right? Pilates, you're thinking more linear. And then Gyrotonic, you're thinking more multiplanar. And in the physical therapy world, we look at the human body in all those different planes. You have the coronal plane, the sagittal plane, the transverse plane. And a lot of our movements are joints. Move maybe primarily in one plane or another, or have a combination of different things. So like, for example, like our shoulders and our hips, right? Which they tend to be the things that people use the most in their exercise, more or less, thinking upper body, lower body. They're multiplanar, multidimensional. Those ball and socket joints, it's physics. It's all it is that it's physics. And those ball and socket joints of our shoulder joints and our hip joints, they create an incredible amount of movement in many, many, many different planes. And functionally, we are demanded to use those joints in multiple different planes as well. Whether we're walking straight or scooting side to side or rotating to squat to pick up our toddler who's like kiting underneath the couch, our bodies are demanded all of these different movements. And so in the PT world, for example, initially, if somebody's coming right out of an injury, we might just work on that primary forward, backward, or side to side plane, and then slowly integrate and use these different muscle groups to help somebody to get to their maximal capacity and to get to their full functional recovery, little by little, for example. So it's really interesting that you just brought up those planes, because it's like, from a PT perspective, just having to study so much physics and human movement. And it's so interesting that even all these basic foundational kind of exercise programs and branded movement platforms have these basic principles. And so does Tai Chi and yoga. That's like the oldest of all kind of, it's not a movement. I mean, I have episodes on this show that just talks about how it's not just movement. It's like a whole lifestyle practice. But the asana effect, the movement aspect piece of that is, these are like ancient concepts of the human body. People have been moving for years, and they figured out that you need to move in multiple different ways in order to gain the maximal benefit. Right. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us live in these times of a movement deficiency, right? And so I think what's really unique about these modalities is that there's such a vast repertoire of movement options, and just sort of introducing people to these various options, because let's face it, most of us are maybe doing some squatting to get down to a chair and up. We're walking, maybe running, maybe biking. You think about all those movements, right? They're sort of in this one plane. And so to help people discover these different ways of moving, it can just feel so good. And it can also be so fun. So a lot of people who maybe they aren't into a traditional workout, or they've been a person who maybe the elliptical, they don't really enjoy. Something like this is so enjoyable. It's fun. Like when we were a kid, right? We would just move in all these different ways and throw ourselves on the ground and, whatever. And it sort of brings back a little bit of that joy, which is so beautiful to see in people.
Absolutely. And touching on that, Kirsten, so just like you, I have my own little movement practice, just taking from my background in dance and Indian classical dance and yoga and all this stuff and PT for my own back stuff. And I have this little sequence that I'll do in the morning, and you feel it if you don't do it, don't you?
Yes.
You know, those mornings where it's just like, boom, boom, it's 6 a.m. and you were supposed to be out the door at 6:30 and you're just like, oh no. And you have to just get ready. And like, you don't have time to do your prayer, or your meditation, or your breath work, or anything. And it's just like a busy morning. And you feel that like when I'm walking out of the door, I'm like, I feel like I'm not taking as big of a breath, or my body just feels like it's not there. And the funny part is, if I go long enough not doing something, I don't notice it anymore. And that scares me. That's actually the scariest for me, is when a couple days go by and I wake up and I'm just like, boom, boom. And I'm running around and I'm like, why don't I feel like a little crappy right now? And I'm like, oh no, I've started to get into the mood of this complacency and this like zone of like, it's just, this is going to be the way it is. And getting used to stagnation almost. I think that's the best way to put it. Getting used to the stagnation. I think that unless you have that burst of energy and that playfulness and that freedom for movement, that's maybe not so structured and not so boom, boom, just like lift this way and then lift this way. And that is it. And just squat down this way. And that's it, which is also great. I do that as well. And I love squatting, and I love shoulder
me
press.
too. Yes.
But if that's, maybe you just create an explore movement.
Right.
And yeah. You just like, you kind of learn a part of yourself that if you're not used to it, you actually don't even know what you're missing, or you don't even, I don't want to say missing as if there's a lack, but rather you don't know what else you could be feeling. And, I would love for you to kind of touch on that and, or what are your thoughts there?
Oh my gosh. So many thoughts. When I think about what I do, and, it's sometimes I'm like, what do I call myself? Right. Am I just a movement teacher, or what am I? But, essentially, what I try to provide is this safe and non-judgmental space, like you said, for people to explore movement and explore being in their body, because for most people, they haven't had a chance to experience that. And so many new clients come in and right off the bat start apologizing to me about their body, which is interesting. Like, I'm sorry, I can't touch my toes, or they'll even ask me on a phone call, I'm a larger bodied individual, would you work with me? Or I'm an older individual, would you work with me? And I have to say, it sort of breaks my heart that people even feel they have to ask that. But I understand, because I have been to even, yoga, which is supposed to be this non-judgmental space and very inclusive. I have been to studios where I did not feel welcome, and where somebody made me feel less than, or made a remark on my body, like, why can't you do that pose? Which is just so ridiculous, ludicrous and silly. And so to offer that, that's really a priority of mine, and touching on what you said before about feeling it when you don't take that time to sort of drop into your body, or do those exercises that perhaps reset you. I find that as well. And I've also found, and maybe you have found this as well with your patients, but it really doesn't require that much. I've found if somebody takes maybe even 5 minutes or 2 minutes and maybe does a couple of things that just feel good in their body or centering, it can make all the difference in how they feel for the rest of the day. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be lengthy. And I think that's what's so awesome about this, about what we do, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I don't even want to show you, but there's like a very specific, like 30-second thing that I do right when I get out of bed, which is just like, looks like I'm some kind of exorcist, crazy person. But I do it every day. It feels so good. I get the crack, crack, crack over here and the crack, crack, crack over there. And, you would think I was in some kind of like figurative movement, like describe the weeping willow in Harry Potter that slams its branches down. I don't know if you've watched Harry Potter, that I don't even know which one it is, but it like smacks everyone down and like tries to kill everyone who enters the tree. Anyhow.
Now I want to see this move, but
yes, but it's crazy, but it's like, I have to do that because it feels good. And I'm almost like, I wish everyone can do this and it feels as good as it does on me, on them.
Right.
But I think the basis of all of this is, for listeners who are movement lovers, you know exactly what we're talking about. You feel it, you've done it. Maybe you're a movement instructor yourself, or maybe you have a movement practice, or maybe you're the type to consume the classes and are more of like a student who likes to take, different kinds of classes throughout the week or throughout the month. And maybe you're a runner, or maybe you're a swimmer, or maybe you're a lifter, or whatever you are. It doesn't matter, but I hope you are in that space. And I want you to get in that space. And if you know somebody who could urge you to love it and love the movement and the freedom and I know a lot of people, it's like, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. You have time for a 30-second stretch in the morning. Actually, you do. I promise you. There's actually nothing that I could bet on and be like, there's a counter argument for this. You have 30 seconds to stretch in the morning. You really do. And so I think it's like, I say this on my Instagram when I'm talking to people and motivating them. I'll say, if something becomes important enough for you, time whips out of thin air. It actually whips out of thin air. And I say this to my husband too, often when I'm like, do you remember when you did this really fast and there was a deadline? He was like, yeah, I remember. Yep. I could do that thing if I wanted to, but that's what it is. If you wanted to. And sometimes that limiting factor is, how do I get myself to want to? And it's just pushing yourself into the deep end of it. Because until you experience it, it's hard to understand the benefits of it and get out of that wired of the, wake up in the morning, do this, go to sleep. Wake up in the morning, do this, go to sleep. It becomes a pattern for us. And then you throw in a vacation or you throw in a trip or something, and then everything goes out of flux. But it's just really important to, even if it doesn't become a habit, even if you just do it when you remember to do it, that's it. It can still create so much benefit. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so much benefit just to having a relationship with your body. And I think, it's sometimes unfortunately takes that being in pain or an injury or a health thing to motivate people, to be the motivator, to want to take care of their body. But if we can just start taking care of our body before those things, knowing that, we only get this one body, right? So we should take care of it and maybe not wait till we get to that place. But hey, I waited till I got to that place.
Yeah, I did too. But hey, listen, you have to start somewhere, and it's never too late. It's never too late. Like you said, you don't have to be, a certain age to start exercising, or a certain body type to exercise. Movement is free. Movement is actually the most basic, fundamental, things of human life. That's what it is. You move. But how do we move in more healthy ways and ways that support us and make us feel good? Not that I'm moving from the train to work, not that move, but like something that feels more just good, just feels good on your body.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that, for that brought up something I've been thinking about. I think a lot of people, maybe they've had sort of a bad experience with exercising, or let's take the classic move, the squat. I get people all the time who kind of tell me like, listen, I've got bad knees, I can't squat. I say, okay, cool. So then we'll do some sort of squat-like patterns, right? Through their knee, their hip, their ankles in different ways that it doesn't bother their knees at all. And then it's like over time, oh, let me just have you stand at the wall. Okay, bend your knees. How does that feel? Oh, it feels fine. Do you remember when you came in? That did not feel fine. And they're like, wow. So I think that, again, if you're a person who maybe feels like your movement practice isn't enjoyable, you can't find a way to move that feels good, or you feel like the programs out there don't fit your body, then perhaps seek out some extra support or guidance, or, pay for those private lessons, knowing that you don't have to stay a student, a private student forever, but you could even take a few lessons just to get some tips, like how can you modify these movements for your body that will work, that then you can do on your own, or watch, you could do watching a YouTube video, or at a gym, or in a group class.
I love that. I'm so on board with everything you just said. I think it's very important. And I know I feel like people are beating a dead horse here when it's like, it's COVID, everyone's stuck at home, like move your body, blah, blah, blah. But we're still really like in this space. And I don't think there's ever going to be a time where life is not stressful or things don't come up and there's not a million things going on in the world. But just taking a couple of seconds for yourself, I think, is really the message here, and getting the guidance and support is the message here. So having said that, how do people find you, Kirsten? What's the best way for people to contact you, reach you, work with you?
Sure. So my website is exploremovement.com. I do in-studio sessions and virtual one-on-one sessions. And I'm on Instagram at Explore Movement. And yeah, mostly
Amazing.
Instagram.
And we did an Instagram live. Like, how long ago was that now?
I think a year.
A year?
Or it might have been in 2020.
No,
Actually,
I think
2 years. Yes.
2 years ago, we did an Instagram live. Maybe I'll link that in the show notes as well, so people can see a little bit of your work as well.
Oh, great.
Amazing. Kirsten, thank you so much for your time today and for being on the show and talking about your journey as well.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for getting these conversations out there. It's so important.